Ethan Calloway said yes without thinking. One weekend, one lie, one borrowed role as the boyfriend of his best friend, the woman he'd spent 12 years convincing himself he didn't want. But snowstorms don't care about careful plans. Honeymoon suites don't care about boundaries, and little girls who've never had a mother have a way of attaching themselves to exactly the right woman at exactly the wrong time. By Sunday evening, nothing about them would ever be the same. If this story already has you, hit that like button, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let's get into it. The call came on a Tuesday, which was already a bad day. Ethan Calloway was lying on his back underneath a 2009 Ford F-150 with a busted oil pan when his phone buzzed against the concrete floor of the garage. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. And then his coworker Danny leaned down and said, "Yo, it's the same number 3 times in a row." And Ethan knew before he even slid out from under the truck. Only one person called him like that. He wiped his hands on his shop rag and picked up. "Vic, don't say no before I finish." Her voice had that quality it got when she was already 3 steps ahead in a conversation he hadn't started yet. Ethan had known Victoria Hale for 19 years, long enough to know that voice meant she'd already thought through all his objections and decided they didn't matter. "You haven't said what you're asking yet." "I know, but you're going to want to say no, and I need you to not do that." Ethan pulled himself up to sitting on the shop stool, cradling the phone between his ear and his shoulder. The garage smelled like oil and coffee and the faint chemical bite of brake cleaner. Outside, November had gotten its teeth into everything. The sky was the color of old dishwater. "Talk," he said. She talked. The short version: her father, Robert Hale, was turning 60 that weekend. The family was gathering at the lake house in Clearwater Ridge, about 2 hours north of the city. The whole extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, her mother, her grandmother, who called everyone sweetheart and still somehow managed to make it sound like a threat. A birthday weekend. Dinner, probably some kind of boat activity if the weather held, and 2 nights in a house that held approximately 40 years of Hale family opinion. The long version? Marcus Webb would be there. "Your ex," Ethan said. "My father still likes him. They golf together. I found out last week he's been invited, and I've spent 7 days trying to figure out how to get out of going to my own father's 60th birthday party, and I can't because that's insane, so I need the next best option." "Which is me. Which is you." "One weekend, Ethan. We show up, we act like we're together. Marcus sees that I've moved on and stops with the..." She paused. "He's been texting me." "What kind of texting?" "The kind where he talks about how I've never really been able to commit to anyone since him. The kind where he frames it as concern." Another pause. "I don't want him to see me alone. I don't want him to think he's right about me." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He knew the history in fragments, the way you know the history of someone you love. Pieces collected over years, some told directly, and some figured out from context. From the way she'd flinched once when a guy grabbed her arm to get her attention. From the way she'd laughed too quickly when someone mentioned Marcus's name at a mutual friend's wedding 3 years ago. Marcus Webb was the kind of man who was very good at making other people feel like the problem. "What does this actually look like?" Ethan asked. "We drive up Friday evening, 2 nights. You'd be my boyfriend. People would ask questions, we'd answer them. We'd have to, She stopped. "We'd have to what?" "Be convincing. Act like we actually..." She exhaled. "You know, like we actually like each other." "We do actually like each other." "You know what I mean." He did know what she meant. That was the part he didn't say anything about. "Okay," he said. "Wait, really?" "I need to figure out what to do with Lily." A beat of silence, then, "Bring her." "Vic, she's 5. A weekend at a lake house with people she doesn't know. My family is going to love her. And honestly, it makes the whole thing more believable. A man who's been dating someone seriously enough to bring his kid, Marcus would never question that." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Lily was with his mother on Tuesday afternoons, a standing arrangement since the divorce came through 18 months ago. His mother would take her for the weekend, no problem. She'd been doing it since before the papers were signed. But something about the way Victoria said "bring her" made him hesitate. Not because he didn't want to. That was the part he wasn't ready to look at directly. I'll ask her what she wants to do, he said finally. She's 5, not furniture. Obviously. He could hear the smile in it. Ask her if she wants to go to a house with a lake and a dog. Your parents have a dog? My uncle is bringing his golden retriever. His name is Admiral. The uncle or the dog? The dog. My uncle is Gerald. Gerald, Ethan said, don't. I'm not saying anything. You were going to say something. I was absolutely going to say something. He stood up, glancing back at the F-150. The oil pan wasn't going anywhere. I'll call you tonight, after I talk to Lily. Thank you, Ethan. The way she said it, quiet, stripped of the strategic tone she'd been using, was what got him. Not the theatrical version of gratitude, just the real one. Don't thank me yet, he said. We haven't figured out how we met. We've known each other for 19 years. How we met is not going to be the hard part. She was right, and she was also completely wrong. But he didn't say that either. He picked Lily up from his mother's place at 4:30. She was wearing a purple raincoat over her school uniform, both knee socks at different heights, and holding a drawing she'd made of what appeared to be a horse, but might have been a dog. That's beautiful, Ethan said. It's Admiral. He stopped. What? Victoria told me about the dog. She texted me. Lily held up the drawing for his inspection. I made it for him. Ethan stood very still. Victoria texted you. On my tablet. She asked if I wanted to come see the lake. Lily shoved the drawing into her backpack. I said yes. I was going to ask you about that. I know. She said to tell you I already said yes, so you couldn't talk me out of it. He stood there for another second, processing the specific way Victoria Hale had outmaneuvered him using his 5-year-old daughter as a proxy, and then he shook his head and said, Get in the car. Lily got in the car. She talked about Admiral for most of the drive home. They left Friday after Ethan got off work at noon. He'd spent Thursday night half-heartedly packing, throwing in 2 pairs of jeans and a button-down he hadn't worn since a work Christmas party 2 years ago. He didn't own a lot of dress clothes. His life had a specific texture. Garage in the morning, Lily's school pickup at 3, dinner, homework, bath time, bedtime, and then about 2 hours of quiet before he fell asleep on the couch, watching whatever was on. It was a good life. It was the life he'd built on the rubble of a bad marriage and a year that had mostly felt like treading water. He wasn't embarrassed by it. He just sometimes noticed, in small, uncomfortable ways, how different it was from Victoria's. She was waiting outside her building when he pulled up, one weekend bag over her shoulder and a garment bag folded over her arm. She was wearing a camel-colored coat he'd never seen before, her dark hair loose, and when she opened the back door to say hi to Lily before getting in the front, Lily grabbed her sleeve with both hands and said, Admiral has a red collar. He does, Victoria said. How do you know that? I looked him up. His owner has Instagram. Ethan met Victoria's eyes in the rearview mirror. She's 5, he said. She's terrifying, Victoria said, and got in the front seat. They made good time for the first hour and a half. Then the sky started doing something strange. Ethan noticed it first, the light going flat and yellow-gray, the kind of sky that meant business. Victoria had the radio on low, and Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat with her face against the window, the drawing of Admiral clutched in one hand. The temperature on the dashboard read 31 degrees and had been dropping steadily since they crossed into the county. Weather app says it's fine, Victoria said, not looking up from her phone. The sky disagrees. The sky is dramatic. The sky is usually right. She glanced up. Outside, the first flakes had started. Not the gentle scenic kind, but the dense, purposeful kind that came sideways. Victoria watched them for a moment, then looked at her phone again. It says light snow, she said. It's lying. By the time they turned onto the county road that led to Clearwater Ridge, the light snow had made a liar out of the weather app entirely. The flakes were thick now, collecting on the road, the visibility dropping in the way it does when a storm decides it's done being polite. Ethan slowed down and stayed slow. Lily slept through all of it. How much farther, he asked. 20 minutes, maybe? Victoria had set her phone down. She was watching the road the way he was. The driveway's unpaved. It's going to be... I'll manage. I know you will. She exhaled. Thank you for doing this. I know it's a lot. Stop thanking me. I'll stop when I'm done being grateful. You're going to be grateful forever. You're very emotional about favors. She turned to look at him, and he could see her trying to hold back a smile. I am not emotional about favors. You cried when I jump-started your car in 2018. It was February, and I'd been stranded for 40 minutes. You cried. I was cold. She looked away, but the smile had won. This is different. This is a bigger ask. It's a weekend, he said. I've known you for 19 years. We can handle a weekend. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, what if your family asks how long we've been together? 6 months, he said without hesitating. She looked at him. Why 6 months? Long enough to be serious, short enough that we're not answering questions about moving in together. Another beat. You've thought about this. I've had 3 days. Have you thought about... She stopped. What? Nothing. Never mind. Vic? It's fine. It doesn't matter. The road curved and Ethan felt the back tires slip just slightly on the packed snow, correcting before Victoria could react. Lily stirred in the back seat and then settled again. I need you to tell me the things that might come up, he said. I don't want to get caught flat-footed in front of your family. She was quiet for longer than he expected. Marcus is going to try to talk to you. Alone, probably. He does this thing where he establishes himself with the people around me, gets them to like him. It makes it harder for me to explain why he's... She stopped again. Why he's what? Why he was bad for me. She said it flatly, like a fact rather than a wound. He was very good at making me feel like I was the difficult one, like I was asking for too much by wanting someone who actually showed up. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. What kind of questions will he ask me? He said. Personal ones? He'll be friendly about it. He's very good at friendly. She paused. Just don't let him make you feel like you have to justify anything. That's his thing. He makes you feel like everything requires justification. Okay. That's it? Okay. What do you want me to say? She looked at him for a moment. Most people would say something reassuring, like, don't worry or I'll handle it. I don't know what's going to happen, Ethan said. So I'm not going to tell you not to worry. I'm just going to be there. Victoria was quiet for a long time after that. Outside, the snow came down. The Hale family lake house was not, technically, a house. It was a house the way that an aircraft carrier is technically a boat. 3 stories, cedar shingled, wrapped in a deep porch that ran the full width of the front and overlooked the lake, which was currently invisible behind a curtain of white. Christmas lights had been strung along the porch railing. Ethan assumed those were year-round, and warm light came from every window. Smoke was rising from what appeared to be 2 separate chimneys. He pulled to a stop in the plowed section of driveway, and for a second, neither of them moved. Big house, he said. Dad did well. It's enormous, Vic. Please don't make it a thing. In the back seat, Lily woke up. She sat up, looked out the window, and said, Is that the lake? With a tone of absolute authority, as though she'd been cataloging lakes her whole life. The lake is behind the house, Victoria said. You can't see it right now because of the snow. Where's Admiral? He's inside. Lily nodded, satisfied with this information, and began unbuckling herself. The front door opened before they'd made it halfway up the porch steps. The woman who appeared in the doorway was in her late 50s, wearing a reindeer sweater approximately 3 weeks too early for the season, and had Victoria's same dark eyes and a smile that managed to be both genuinely warm and quietly calculating. This was Eleanor Hale. Ethan had heard about her for nearly 2 decades. Seeing her in person was like meeting a historical figure. Victoria. She opened her arms and Victoria walked into them, and the way Victoria's posture changed, the CEO's shoulders dropping, the careful composure softening, was something Ethan filed away without meaning to. Then Eleanor Hale looked at him. And this must be Ethan, she said, in a voice that suggested she'd already decided what she thought about him and was simply waiting to see if he'd confirm it. "Hi," Ethan said. "Mrs. Hale. Thank you for having us." She studied him for a moment. The work-roughened hands, the jacket that wasn't quite right for the occasion, the way he was standing slightly in front of Lily without seeming to notice he was doing it. "You have a very firm handshake," she said finally. "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. That was an observation. "We'll see about the compliments." She looked down at Lily. "And who are you, young lady?" Lily looked up at her. "I'm Lily. I'm 5. I drew a picture of Admiral." Eleanor Hale blinked. Then she smiled, and for the first time it reached all the way to her eyes. "Well, you'd better come in." But the inside of the lake house was warm and loud, and smelled like something cooking that Ethan couldn't identify but wanted immediately. Victoria's father, Robert, a tall man in his early 60s with an easy laugh and Victoria's same precision behind the eyes, found them in the entryway and shook Ethan's hand with both of his, the way men do when they mean it. Victoria's Aunt Deborah arrived 2 minutes later and started asking Ethan questions about his work with the specific energy of someone who finds it genuinely interesting, which he hadn't been expecting. A cousin named Tyler offered him a beer before he'd even taken his coat off. And then there was Admiral. Admiral was a 3-year-old golden retriever with no concept of personal space and an immediate, profound love for Lily Calloway. He found her in the entryway, sat down directly in front of her, and waited. Lily looked at him for exactly 2 seconds, then sat cross down on the floor and produced the drawing from her jacket pocket. "I made this for you," she told the dog. Admiral sniffed the drawing. Then he licked Lily's face, which apparently satisfied all parties, because Lily started laughing, and Admiral's tail destroyed a small decorative arrangement on the entryway table, and Eleanor Hale watched it all from the kitchen doorway with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Victoria appeared at his elbow. "She's going to be fine," she said quietly. "I know," he said. He didn't say the other part, that Lily being fine was never what he'd been worried about. The trouble started at dinner. Not dramatically. That was the thing about Marcus Webb. He didn't do dramatic. He did something quieter and harder to defend against. Ethan saw him for the first time when they sat down at the long table. 14 people, candlelight, the windows dark with snow now piling steadily against the glass. Marcus was across the table and 3 seats down, and he was exactly what Ethan had expected. Good-looking in an assembled way, like someone had put him together from a list of features that read well individually. Confident in the particular way of men who've never really been told no. He'd smiled at Victoria when she walked in, and the smile had said several things simultaneously, none of them as friendly as the surface of it. He didn't approach them during dinner. He was too smart for that. What he did was talk to Robert Hale, loudly enough to carry, about a hiking trip they'd apparently taken 2 summers ago. The kind of easy insider conversation that broadcast familiarity. That said, "I have history here. I belong at this table. What about you?" Ethan ate his pot roast and didn't react. Victoria ate hers with her shoulders doing that CEO thing again. Under the table, he moved his knee until it rested against hers. Not a gesture. Just contact. Just, "I'm here." He felt her exhale. Lily was at the other end of the table between Eleanor and the cousin Tyler, telling Eleanor something about a TV show with what appeared to be genuine intensity. Eleanor was listening with complete attention, which told Ethan something about Eleanor Hale that he hadn't known before. "So, Ethan," Marcus's voice from across the table. Even the way he said a name was strategic, friendly, relaxed, the tone of someone who just wants to get to know you, except the timing was chosen. Ethan looked up. "Yeah. Vic tells me you're a mechanic." Victoria hadn't told him anything. They'd barely spoken since they arrived. "That's right." "That's great. Honest work." The way he said honest work put it slightly below what it actually was. "How long have you two been—" She mentioned 6 months? "About that," Ethan said. "That's great." Again, with the great. "Must be interesting, the dynamic, given how long you've known each other." Ethan held his gaze. "We've been friends for a long time, yeah. I would have thought, when 2 people are close like that and one of them is—" Not to be blunt, but you two come from pretty different worlds. Did that ever feel... Marcus, Victoria's voice, flat and final. I'm just making conversation. I know what you're doing. She picked up her water glass and took a sip, and the composure in it was remarkable. Ethan had seen her hold boardrooms with that same measured calm. And I appreciate that my dad likes having you here, but let's not. The table had gone slightly quieter, in that way where everyone is pretending not to listen. Marcus smiled. Of course. He lifted his own glass. To Robert, happy birthday. The moment dissolved into the clink of glasses, and Robert Hale's laugh and someone asking for the breadbasket, and Marcus turned to talk to the person beside him as though it had meant nothing. Under the table, Victoria's hand found Ethan's knee and pressed once, briefly, then withdrew. He didn't look at her. He just reached for his fork and went back to dinner. The room situation was discovered after dinner. Ethan heard Victoria's mother say it to her in the hallway off the kitchen in what was intended to be a low voice. There was a mistake with the reservations. Well, not reservations, but Gerald was supposed to have the East Wing guest room, and instead he's in the blue room because of his knee. So that's... The math unspooled rapidly, and Ethan could see it coming before Eleanor finished the sentence. The only room with 2 beds available, Eleanor said, with a specific kind of studied neutrality, is the honeymoon suite on the 3rd floor. Victoria turned and looked at Ethan across the hallway. Ethan looked back at her. That's fine, Victoria said, and her voice didn't waver even slightly. I can take a couch, Ethan said. The couches in the common area have Deborah's family in them, Eleanor said, and the sunroom is cold. She looked between them. I'm sure 2 people in a relationship can manage a suite. There's a sitting room and a very large... Mom, Victoria's voice. I'm just describing the room. I know what you're doing, Eleanor Hale smiled serenely. Lily can have the adjoining room. It's a small one, connects to the suite. She'll be just next door. Lily, who had appeared in the hallway at some point, said, Does the small room have a window? It does, Eleanor said. Can I see the snow? You can see all the snow you want. Lily looked at Ethan. That's fine, she said, using his words back at him, and went to find Admiral. The suite was as advertised, large. It was also decorated in the way of a room that had been designed around a specific aspiration. Soft lighting, a fireplace that actually worked, a bed that looked like it had been assembled from a catalog page titled Romance. There was a sitting room with a love seat and a narrow table, and Ethan stood in the middle of it with his overnight bag and tried not to look at anything. I'll sleep in here, he said. The love seat pulls out, probably. Victoria was in the bedroom doorway. She'd changed out of her dinner clothes into something less composed. Dark leggings, an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked more like herself than she had all evening, which was its own specific problem. You don't have to do that, she said. I'm not letting you sleep on a pullout. The bed is large enough for... She stopped. We're adults, Ethan. I know we're adults. We've shared space before. Remember the conference in Denver? We shared a hotel room. That was a double room. And this has a sitting area. It's actually more space than Denver. He stood there. She was right, technically, logically, in every practical sense. He was also aware, with the specific uncomfortable awareness he'd been pushing down for the better part of the drive up, that Denver had been 3 years ago, before something had shifted. Before he'd started noticing things he hadn't used to notice. Fine, he said. Thank you. She moved into the sitting room to set down her garment bag. She was close enough now that he could smell whatever she was wearing, something clean and faint, and he directed his attention firmly at the fireplace. I should check on Lily, he said. She's been asleep for 20 minutes. Your mom texted the sleep tracking thing. He looked at her. You have the sleep tracker app? She added me in July. Victoria said it simply, like it was unremarkable, like it hadn't lodged in his chest a little. Victoria, go check on her if you want. I'll get ready for bed. He checked on Lily. She was asleep in the small adjoining room, curled up with Admiral at the foot of the bed. He'd apparently been allowed to stay, a decision no one seemed to have formally made, and the window showed nothing but white and dark and the sound of wind picking up against the glass. He stood there for a minute, watching her sleep. He thought about what Victoria had said at dinner, not the part she'd said out loud, but the part underneath it. I don't want him to see me alone. I don't want him to think he's right about me. He thought about Marcus Webb's smile and the way it moved and what it was designed to do. He thought about Victoria at 20, the first time he'd seen that composure crack. The night her first serious boyfriend before Marcus had broken up with her over text message, and she'd called Ethan at midnight and he'd driven to her apartment in the rain, and she'd opened the door and said, "I'm fine," in a voice that made it extremely clear she was not fine. And he'd made terrible coffee in her terrible coffee maker, and they'd sat on her kitchen floor until 3 in the morning, and she'd never mentioned it directly again. He'd loved her then. He'd known it then, in a quiet way, in the kind of way you can almost hide from yourself if you're careful enough. He'd been careful for a long time. Lily made a small sound in her sleep and pulled her blanket up, and Admiral sighed heavily from the foot of the bed, and Ethan pulled her door almost closed and went back to the suite. The fire was going. Victoria was sitting on the love seat with her legs tucked under her, reading something on her phone. She'd turned off the overhead light, and the room was warm and dim, the firelight moving on the walls. She looked up when he came in. "She okay?" she said. "Sound asleep. Admiral's with her." Gerald's going to be so annoyed. He can never get Admiral to sleep in the room with him. Ethan sat down in the chair across from her. "What time does everything start tomorrow?" "Mom wants everyone at breakfast by 8. Then she planned some outdoor activity, something with the frozen lake. If it's still frozen, I'm not sure." She looked at her phone. "The snow is supposed to stop by midnight, but it's going to be cold. I'll need to borrow a warmer coat. Gerald has an extra. He's about your size." She paused. "He's going to love you, by the way." "Gerald? He likes people who are direct." "How can you tell I'm direct?" "You just said I need to borrow a coat instead of figuring out how to make it not a need." She looked at him. "Most people would have said, 'Oh, I'll be fine,' and then been cold all day." He thought about that. "I also said I'd take the pull out." "You did, and then I talked you out of it." She tilted her head. "You're not as stubborn as you used to be. Lily cured me. Children do that." A log shifted in the fireplace. Outside, the wind moved against the windows. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "Tomorrow, with Marcus around." She was quiet for a moment. "I think so. Tonight was harder than I expected. I thought I was past it." She picked at the edge of her phone case. "He has this way of making me feel like I'm still the person I was when I was with him. Like I haven't moved. Like I'm still standing in that kitchen waiting for him to come home." She stopped. "Sorry, that's more than you needed." "You don't have to apologize." "I know." She glanced up. "I tell you things I don't tell other people." "I know." "Does that bother you?" "No," he said. Then more honestly, "Sometimes I wonder if you know how much you tell me." She considered that. "What do you mean?" He thought about how to answer it. "I mean, you have a version of yourself you show to people. The CEO thing, the composure. You're very good at it." He paused. "And then there's the version you are at 11 p.m. when you call me because you're stressed about a board meeting and you need to talk to someone who's not going to care about the board meeting." She was looking at him. "I know both of them," he said. "That's all." The fire popped softly. Somewhere in the house, someone laughed. One of the cousins, probably. Muffled through the ceiling and the walls. Victoria said quietly, "You're the only person I can do that with." He didn't answer that. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because the answer felt like something he shouldn't say in a dark room where they were about to sleep 6 feet from each other. "Get some sleep," he said instead. "Tomorrow's going to be a lot." She unfolded herself from the love seat. "Probably." She moved toward the bedroom door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "Ethan." "Yeah." "Thank you. Again." "You're going to keep saying that no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Probably." He almost said it. It was right there, at the edge of his teeth, the thing he'd been carrying at a careful distance for longer than he wanted to count. He felt it and let it pass. "Good night, Vic," he said. "Good night, Ethan," she said, and disappeared into the bedroom, and he sat in the chair by the fire for a long time, listening to the snow press its weight against the windows. Before he finally got up and turned off the lamp, he woke up stiff. The chair hadn't been designed for sleeping, which was information Ethan's lower back communicated to him at approximately 5:45 in the morning with considerable enthusiasm. He sat up, rolled his neck until something cracked, and looked at the bedroom door. Closed. The fire had burned down to embers. Outside the windows, the snow had stopped, and the world was the particular blue-white silence of a morning after a storm. Everything muffled, the lake invisible under a smooth white sheet, the tree line dark against a sky that was thinking about becoming pale. He got up quietly, changed in the sitting room, and went to check on Lily. She was already awake. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed with Admiral beside her, both of them looking out the window at the snow-covered lake like they were watching something very important. She had her blanket around her shoulders, and her hair was doing the thing it always did in the morning, completely sideways, unimpressed with gravity. "It stopped," she said without turning around. "Yeah. Can we go outside?" "After breakfast, and you need a hat." She turned around. Her face had that particular morning expression, not quite awake yet, still soft. "Is Victoria up?" "Not yet." Lily considered this. "She sleeps later than us." "Most people do." "Is that because she's a CEO?" He crouched down to look for her shoes. "Where did you put your sneakers?" "Under the bed. CEOs work at night, right? That's why they sleep late?" "Something like that." She was quiet for a second, watching him fish her sneakers out from under the bed frame. "Do you like her?" He looked up. "What?" "Victoria." Lily said it plainly, the way 5-year-olds ask things. No strategy behind it, no awareness that the question was anything other than obvious. "Do you like her?" Actually. He handed her a sneaker. "She's my best friend." "That's not what I asked." He looked at his daughter for a moment. She looked back at him with his own eyes, brown, direct, constitutionally incapable of letting things slide. "Put your shoes on," he said. She put her shoes on. She didn't press it, but she didn't look like she'd forgotten either, and Lily Calloway had a memory like a steel trap. He'd learned that about her early. They went downstairs. The kitchen was already occupied. Robert Hale was at the stove making coffee with the focused attention of a man for whom coffee was a serious endeavor. And Uncle Gerald was at the kitchen table with yesterday's newspaper, his reading glasses low on his nose. Admiral followed Lily in and was immediately fed a corner of Gerald's toast, which Gerald attempted to deny and which Admiral's tale betrayed entirely. Robert looked up. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Good enough," Ethan said. "Coffee?" "Please." Robert handed him a mug without ceremony, which Ethan appreciated. There was a kind of man who made guests perform gratitude for every small thing, and a kind who just handed you the coffee, and Robert Hale was firmly the second kind. Ethan liked him immediately and without reservation. Gerald looked up from his newspaper. He was a large man in his 60s with a white beard and the general aspect of someone who'd spent a lot of time outdoors. "You're the mechanic." "That's right. What do you work on?" "Mostly American makes, some imports. We get a lot of trucks where I am." Gerald nodded slowly. "My 2004 Silverado needs a rear differential. Shop near me wants $4,000. That's high for a rear diff. What's it doing?" "Whining above 60 and a little vibration. Could be the fluid before it's the differential itself. When's the last time it was serviced?" Gerald stared at him. "I have no idea." "Try the fluid first. It's a $40 fix if that's what it is." Gerald picked up his coffee, nodded once, and went back to his newspaper. Robert caught Ethan's eye over the rim of his mug and gave him a small, satisfied look that said something without words. Lily had climbed into the chair beside Gerald and was telling him about the drawing she'd made for Admiral. Gerald listened with the focused attention of a man who had decided this was worth his time, which Ethan noted and filed. Victoria came downstairs at 7:58, 2 minutes before Eleanor's stated breakfast deadline, dressed in a dark green sweater and jeans with her hair down. She looked composed in the familiar way. The careful morning composure, not the loose middle-of-the-night version he'd seen last night by the fire. She came into the kitchen, registered the scene, Ethan with coffee, Lily annexed by Gerald, Admiral underfoot, and something in her shoulders eased. She moved to stand beside Ethan at the counter, close enough that their arms touched. "Morning," she said quietly. "Morning." He handed her his coffee mug without thinking. She took it, drank from it, handed it back. Neither of them acknowledged this as anything. Across the kitchen, Robert Hale was watching them with an expression his wife probably would have called neutral, and Ethan would have called everything but. Breakfast was the full production. Eleanor had been up since 6, apparently, which explained the spread. Eggs 3 ways, toast, fruit, something that turned out to be a smoked salmon situation that Ethan hadn't expected, and which Lily approached with deep suspicion before Gerald told her it was fancy fish, and she tried it and declared it fine. All 14 members of the extended family rotated through the kitchen and dining room over the course of an hour in the overlapping way of large families who've been doing this long enough to have a system. Marcus appeared at 8:15. He came in already dressed, already put together, which was a kind of statement. He poured his own coffee and said good morning to Robert and kissed Eleanor's cheek and nodded at Ethan across the room with a smile that was perfectly calibrated. Not hostile, not overly friendly, just present. Managing the room. Victoria was in the middle of a conversation with her cousin Dana about something work-related. She didn't look up when Marcus came in, but Ethan watched her jaw do something subtle. Lily looked at Marcus, then at Ethan, then back at Marcus. Kids had a radar for tension that adults forgot about. "More eggs?" Ethan asked her, redirecting. "I want to see the lake," she said, "after breakfast." "You keep saying after breakfast." "Because breakfast isn't over yet." She considered this argument, found it technically valid, and went back to her plate. After breakfast, Eleanor announced the day's plan with the energy of a general. Family photographs at the lake at 10, lunch at noon, free time in the afternoon before the birthday dinner at 7. There were groans about the photographs from the cousins, which Eleanor ignored with practiced ease. Outside, the cold was serious, the kind that hit the inside of your nose and made your eyes water within 30 seconds. Ethan had borrowed Gerald's extra jacket, a heavy canvas thing that was slightly too wide in the shoulders, and Lily had been bundled into approximately 4 layers by Eleanor, who seemed to view underdressed children as a personal affront. Victoria appeared at his side as they crossed the porch toward the snow-covered lawn. "Gerald's jacket," she said. "He offered. It's enormous on you. It's warm." She looked at him sideways. "You look like you're wearing a tent." "A warm tent." She almost smiled. Not quite. The lake air was getting into the morning, and the family was spreading out across the snow-covered lawn, and Marcus was 20 feet away talking to one of the uncles. But almost. Lily had found Admiral, and the two of them were already at the edge of the lake where the snow met the frozen shore, Lily testing the ice with one careful boot. "Lily," Ethan's voice, quiet but carrying. She looked back at him. "Not yet," he said. "Stay on the shore." She stepped back. Admiral sat down beside her like he understood the instruction. The frozen lake was something. The snow had settled across it in smooth, unmarked white, and at the edges it had a faint blue tint where the ice showed through. The tree line on the far side was dark spruce and bare birch, and the sky above was that pale winter blue that appears only after a storm cleans everything. The kind of morning that looked like it had been assembled to make people feel something. Ethan stood at the edge of the lawn with his coffee. Eleanor had sent everyone out with thermoses, and looked at it. Victoria came to stand beside him, her shoulder against his arm. "Pretty," he said. "Dad loves this lake," she said. "He learned to fish here. His father taught him." She paused. "That's the thing about this place. It has all this history in it. Every corner of it has something attached." "Good things?" "Mostly." She looked out at the frozen surface. "Some complicated things. Marcus and we were here once, for a summer weekend, a long time ago." She was quiet. "I didn't think it would feel like this. Being back. What does it feel like?" She considered it. "Like 2 things at once, the good version and the other version." He didn't say anything, just stood beside her while the family spread out across the lawn and someone's kid threw a snowball, and Eleanor called out instructions about the photograph positions, and the cold came off the lake in steady waves. After a moment, without planning it, He shifted and put his arm around her. Not a performance. There was no one close enough to be watching. Just the arm, her shoulder against his side, and he felt her lean in slightly, adjusting her weight. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. Lily came running back across the snow. "Can we do the photo by the ice? Gerald says the ice is thick enough to stand on near the edge." "Gerald is a large man and the ice will hold him differently than it holds you," Ethan said. "I weigh 42 pounds. "How do you know that?" "Doctor's office, last month." She looked up at him with his own expression on her face. "I'm light, Dad." "You're staying on the shore." She exhaled the specific exhale of a child who has been wronged by reasonable adults and went back to Admiral. Victoria was looking at him. "What?" he said. "Nothing." The almost smile had become an actual one. "You're very calm when she argues with you." "She's 5. She's supposed to argue." "Most people get rattled." "I used to. You get used to it." He looked down at her. "You okay?" "Yeah." She meant it this time. "Yeah, I actually am." The photographs were chaos in the way of all family photographs. Eleanor had a specific arrangement in mind, and the family had opinions about the arrangement, and Eleanor's opinions and the family's opinions were in persistent, cheerful conflict. Robert stood in the center of it all, with the expression of a man who had made peace long ago with not being in charge of his own birthday. Ethan and Victoria ended up in the back row, the taller people, with Lily in front of them. Ethan had his hand on Lily's shoulder to keep her from drifting toward the lake. Victoria was beside him. Marcus positioned himself across the group, and Ethan noticed, because he was paying attention, the way Marcus watched Victoria during the shuffle of who stood where. Not obvious, just a steady peripheral attention, the kind that said he was always tracking. Victoria noticed too. Ethan felt it in the slight change in her posture. He moved without making a production of it. Just shifted so he was a half step closer to her, his arm brushing hers. She glanced at him. He looked straight ahead at whoever was trying to figure out Eleanor's camera. The first few photos went fine. Then Eleanor's sister Marion, who was standing to Marcus's left, said cheerfully, "Victoria, you look so happy." "You both do. You and Ethan. Doesn't she look happy, Marcus?" In the specific way of family members who believe they are being subtle. Marcus looked at Victoria. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite a smile. "She does," he said. "Though Victoria's always been good at looking happy." The words were delivered pleasantly. The meaning inside them was not. Ethan heard Victoria inhale quietly beside him. Ethan looked at Marcus, directly and without expression. Marcus held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. "Can we get one with just the kids?" Eleanor called out, and the moment dissolved into movement, but the words had landed. Ethan could feel Victoria beside him, could feel the way she'd gone slightly still in the way she did when something hit, and she was deciding whether to let it show. The CEO composure was doing its job. From a distance, she looked completely fine. He knew the difference. He reached over and took her hand. Not a dramatic gesture. He just took it, her fingers cold through her gloves, his thumb moving once across her knuckles, and held on. She didn't look at him. But her grip came back, firm and immediate, and she held on too. Across the group, Lily was being arranged with the 4 other children by Eleanor, and Lily was taking this assignment very seriously. She had decided she should stand next to the youngest child, a 3-year-old cousin named Pete, in order to make sure he didn't fall down. Nobody had asked her to do this. She had simply assessed the situation and made a decision. Victoria was watching her. "She's something," Victoria said quietly. "She thinks everything is her job," Ethan said. "She's not wrong." Victoria paused. "Where does she get that?" He glanced sideways at her. "Can't imagine." Victoria looked at him. For a second, the composure dropped entirely. Not into sadness, just into something unguarded, something that looked like recognition. She looked away first. Lunch was easier. The family had broken into smaller groupings by then, the formal gathering of the morning dissolving into something looser. Some of the cousins had started a half-hearted snowball fight on the far side of the yard. Gerald had disappeared with his newspaper again. Robert and 2 of his friends had colonized the living room and were talking about boats with the focused energy of men who had strong opinions about boats. Ethan ended up at the kitchen table with Dana, Victoria's cousin, who turned out to be a middle school science teacher from Pittsburgh with a dry sense of humor and no patience for pretense, which Ethan found immediately comfortable. Victoria was across the room helping Eleanor with something, and occasionally he'd catch a piece of their conversation. The particular verbal shorthand of a mother and daughter who have a complicated history and have learned over time to navigate it without crashing. Marcus was not in the kitchen. He was in the living room with Robert, and through the doorway Ethan could hear the easy conversation. Golf, something about a business contact, the kind of talk that was really about access and positioning dressed up as casual. It was impressively done, he had to admit. Marcus was good at it. Dana leaned over and said quietly, "He's been working Dad since he got here." "Robert?" "No. Gerald's not an idiot. Robert." She nodded toward the living room. Marcus figures if he stays in with Robert, it doesn't matter what Victoria thinks. She looked at Ethan levelly. "How long have you actually known her?" 19 years. Dana nodded slowly. "And this is new. The relationship." 6 months. She studied him. She had the same dark eyes as the family, and she used them the way good teachers do. Not unkindly, but with an accuracy that was slightly unsettling. "Can I tell you something, as someone who loves Victoria and has watched her for 30 years? "Go ahead." "She doesn't introduce people to this family unless she means it. She brought Marcus exactly once, years ago, and we all thought—" Dana stopped. "We were wrong about that, obviously." She looked at him steadily. "I don't think we're wrong about this." Ethan didn't say anything. "She looks different," Dana said. "With you here. She looks like herself." She paused. "I don't know if you know that." He did know it, actually. That was part of the problem. "Thank you," he said. Dana looked at him a moment longer, then picked up her coffee. "Don't mess it up," she said cheerfully, and changed the subject to the snowball fight outside, which had apparently gotten political. The afternoon's complications arrived around 3 o'clock, in the form of Marcus finding Ethan alone in the hallway outside the library. Alone being relative, Lily was 20 feet away in the library itself, working on a puzzle with Robert, who had apparently decided this was how he wanted to spend his birthday afternoon, and no one was going to tell him otherwise. Marcus came around the corner and stopped, and the quality of the stop said he'd been looking for this. "Hey," he said, easy, relaxed, the voice of a man who has nowhere to be. "Hey," Ethan said. "I wanted to say, I wasn't trying to make things uncomfortable this morning with the photo thing." Ethan looked at him. "Okay. Marcus smiled. It was a good smile. Ethan could see why it worked on people. "Victoria and I have history. It's a little weird. I won't pretend it's not. I just want to make sure there are no hard feelings between us." "No hard feelings," Ethan said. "Good." Marcus nodded, looked at the floor briefly, then back up. "She talks about you a lot. Did you know that?" "We're close." "Yeah, she mentioned." He paused. "For a long time, she talked about you the way people talk about someone who's, not a possibility, like a category. The friend." He tilted his head slightly. "I guess that changed." Ethan waited. "It just surprises me a little," Marcus said. The world she operates in and yours are pretty." He let it hang. Not finishing the sentence was its own sentence. "Different," Ethan said. "I'm not trying to be an ass about it." "I know you're not trying to be." Marcus looked at him. For the first time, the easy friendliness had a seam in it. "She has high standards for the people around her." "She should," Ethan said. "She's worked hard for everything she has. She ought to be selective." "That's not, Marcus paused, recalibrated. "I'm just saying, relationships are hard when people want different things." "Is there something you actually want to say to me?" Ethan said. "Because we can do that. Or we can keep doing this, but I'm going to tell you honestly, I'm not great at this particular kind of conversation." Marcus was quiet for a second. Then he laughed. A real one, slightly surprised. "She didn't mention that about you." "What?" "That you're direct." "She probably didn't think it was relevant." "Maybe." Marcus looked at him, and for a moment the performance of it dropped, and what was underneath was something more complicated. Not malice exactly, more like a man who had lost something and hadn't entirely accepted it. She's happy, he said. I can see that. Good, Ethan said. I just wanted to make sure she... He stopped. Never mind. He straightened. Enjoy the weekend. He walked away. Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment. From inside the library, he heard Lily say, "This piece goes there, I think," and Robert say, "Let's try it," and the small sound of a puzzle piece finding its place. He didn't tell Victoria about the conversation right away. He told her at 9:30 that night, when the dinner had wound down and the family had separated into their various corners of the house, and they were back in the suite, the fire going, her in the love seat and him in the chair. She listened without interrupting. "He said she's happy," she said finally. "About me?" "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if he means it." "I think he does, actually." She looked at him. "You do?" "Whatever he is, I don't think he's lying about that part." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "He's not a good ex-boyfriend, but I think he actually sees it." "What does he see?" Ethan looked at her across the room, the fire between them, the snow still deep outside, the house settled into its nighttime sounds. She was looking at him with those dark eyes, quiet and direct and waiting. "That you're doing okay," he said, "more than okay." She held his gaze for a second. Then she looked down, and he saw something move across her face. Not sadness, but something more like relief. The kind that comes with putting something down you've been carrying for too long. "I think this is working," she said. Whatever we're doing, my family believes it." "Your family believed it before we did anything." She looked up. "What does that mean?" He thought about how to answer it. He thought about Dana's voice at the kitchen table. She looks like herself. He thought about Victoria's grip on his hand by the frozen lake, immediate and firm. He thought about all the things he hadn't said yet. "Nothing," he said. "Get some sleep, Vic." She watched him for a moment longer. He could see her deciding whether to push it, the way she sometimes did late at night when her guard was down. She didn't push it. "Good night, Ethan," she said, and went to bed. He sat by the fire long after it burned low, listening to the house settle and the cold press against the glass, turning things over that didn't have answers yet, or maybe had answers he wasn't ready for, until the last of the embers finally went dark. Sunday morning arrived gray and still. The storm had left everything clean in the way that only happens in winter. Every surface smooth, every edge softened, the world looking like it had been given a second chance at a first impression. Ethan stood on the porch with his coffee at 7 in the morning and watched the light come up over the lake, pale and directionless. The kind of light that didn't cast shadows yet. The ice was visible this morning, dark at the center where it was deepest, lighter at the edges where snow had blown across the surface in long white ribbons. He hadn't slept well. Not because of the chair, which he'd more or less made peace with. Something else had kept him awake. The conversation with Marcus in the hallway, and then the later conversation by the fire, and the specific way Victoria had looked at him when he'd said more than okay. The way she'd held his gaze a half-second longer than she needed to before looking down. He was doing the thing he'd gotten good at, which was noticing and then deliberately not examining. He'd been doing it for years. He was very practiced. He was also aware, in the particular way of someone standing close to the edge of something, that he was getting worse at it. The screen door opened behind him. He expected Victoria. It was Robert. Victoria's father came out in a heavy flannel shirt with his own coffee, moving with the slightly careful gait of a man whose knees had started filing complaints. He stood beside Ethan at the porch railing and looked at the lake. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Well enough." "The chair in the sitting room isn't for sleeping, in case you were wondering." Ethan looked at him. Robert kept looking at the lake. Eleanor noticed. She notices everything, which is both a gift and a burden, depending on the day. He sipped his coffee. "Don't worry about it. She's not going to say anything." "It's not," Ethan started. "I'm not asking you to explain." Robert said it gently, without looking at him. "I'm 60 years old today. I've been watching people for a long time. I know what complicated looks like, and I know what people do when they're figuring something out." Ethan was quiet. "She's been alone for a while," Robert said. Not physically alone. Victoria's never had trouble being around people. But he paused. The particular kind of alone where you stop letting people see you. She's been doing that since Marcus. He looked at Ethan now. She doesn't do that with you. We've known each other a long time. I know you have. Robert nodded. That's not what I mean. He looked back at the lake. I'm not trying to pressure you into anything. It's my birthday. I'm allowed to say a thing once and not repeat it. He straightened. She's worth the complicated parts. That's all I wanted to say. He went back inside. Ethan stood on the porch for another 10 minutes, the cold working into his hands through the mug, and didn't have a single useful thought. The birthday breakfast was an event. Eleanor had outdone herself, or more accurately, Eleanor had started doing herself at 5 in the morning, which was her standard approach to any occasion she considered important. There were fresh rolls and a frittata and enough food for 20 people serving 14, and Robert was made to sit at the head of the table and accept attention with the slightly uncomfortable grace of a man who preferred to be the one making other people comfortable. Lily had made him a card. She'd done it the night before at the small writing desk in her room, using a pen she'd borrowed from Gerald and a sheet of paper from Eleanor's notepad, and the card said, "Happy Birthday, Robert," in letters that varied considerably in size and were arranged with more enthusiasm than precision. And inside it said, "I hope you have a good day. Your lake is very nice." Lily, Ethan's daughter. She'd included a drawing of Admiral. Robert read it at the table. He didn't say anything for a moment. "This is the best card I've received," he said. "I know," Lily said. Eleanor made a sound that she quickly covered with a cough. The morning moved at the particular pace of a family gathering on its last full day. Slightly more tender than the previous ones, slightly more aware of its own ending. People lingered over coffee. Conversations went sideways into old stories. Dana's husband, who'd been quiet all weekend, suddenly turned out to have a very good sense of humor, which reorganized everyone's impression of him in about 4 minutes. Marcus was present. He ate breakfast, spoke when spoken to, laughed at the right moments. He was doing the same thing he'd been doing all weekend, which was performing the role of someone who wasn't performing anything. Ethan had stopped trying to catch him at it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Victoria ate her breakfast and talked to her cousin and laughed at the thing Dana's husband said and looked, for the first time since they'd arrived on Friday, like she was genuinely inside the weekend rather than managing it from a slight distance. Under the table at some point, her foot had ended up touching his. Neither of them moved it. The family photographs had been deemed incomplete by Eleanor. She'd reviewed them on the camera the previous morning and decided that the lighting had been wrong and the arrangement had been wrong, and specifically that the one of Robert with the full family didn't show the lake properly. And so another round was scheduled for after breakfast. This was announced with the tone of a person for whom this was not a negotiation, and the family accepted it with the practiced ease of people who had learned a long time ago that Eleanor's announcements were not negotiations. They went out at 10. The morning had warmed slightly, barely above freezing, but enough that the air had lost its sharp edge. The lake ice looked different in this light, the sun higher and the snow surface catching it differently, and Ethan thought it was actually a better morning for photographs than the previous one had been, though he didn't say this because Eleanor hadn't asked. The setup was similar to before: back row, front row, children in front. Robert in the center, Eleanor beside him. The cousins arranged by height with the specific reluctant compliance of adults who privately enjoy family photos and won't admit it. Ethan and Victoria ended up in the same position as before, back row, side by side, Lily stationed in front of Ethan with one hand on Admiral's collar to keep him from ruining everything. It was going fine. The first few arrangements were done. Gerald's knee was bothering him, and he was told twice by Eleanor to stop leaning. Dana's youngest had found something in the snow that was commanding his complete attention. Robert was laughing about something Marion had just said. And then Marcus moved. He'd been on the far end of the back row, and he shifted, casually, as though adjusting for the light, so that he was now positioned just beside Victoria on her left, with Ethan on her right. It put him in Victoria's peripheral vision in a way that was deliberate and deniable. He leaned slightly toward her. Low voice, meant only for her. "You look good, Vic. Genuinely. Being here suits you." Victoria kept her eyes forward. Her jaw did the subtle thing. I've been thinking, Marcus continued, quiet and conversational, like they were having a normal exchange. About what I said at dinner Friday. I wasn't trying to be a jab. I still care about you. I think that's obvious. A small pause. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that you don't have to keep performing the okay. Not around me. It was very well done. The thing inside the thing. The surface concern wrapping the implication that she wasn't okay, that the weekend was a performance, that he could see through it in a way no one else could. It was designed to find exactly the old wound, the one he'd spent 2 years making. Victoria's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw her hand at her side close into a fist. He'd heard it. Not all of it, but enough. The low voice, the performing the okay, the particular tone Marcus used that managed to sound like compassion and function like something else. He turned and looked at Victoria. Her eyes were ahead. Her face was doing what it did. The composure holding while something beneath it worked hard to stay contained, and he knew exactly what it cost her because he'd seen her pay that cost before. He thought about what she'd said 2 nights ago. He makes me feel like I'm still the person I was when I was with him, like I haven't moved. He thought about all of it, 19 years of it, and something that had been sitting very still inside him for a very long time stopped sitting still. He didn't plan what happened next. He turned to her, put his hand against her jaw, and kissed her. Not a performance. He'd known what performance would have felt like. A demonstration, angled for the audience, designed to make a point. This wasn't that. This was just his mouth on hers, and his hand at the side of her face, and the cold air around them, and the world going very quiet. For 1/2 second, nothing happened. He felt her inhale sharply through her nose, surprise, pure and immediate. Then she kissed him back. Her hand came up and gripped the front of Gerald's jacket, and she kissed him back with the particular quality of something that had been held in a closed hand for too long and had finally been released. And the surprise in it became something else, something deliberate, something that said, yes, this, finally this. He was aware, from a distance, of the family around them. He heard Dana make a sound. He heard someone, possibly Eleanor, say nothing at all, which in some ways was louder. He was aware of the lake behind them and the cold air and the light. He was mostly aware of Victoria. He pulled back first, not far. She kept her grip on the jacket for a moment, then let go. Her eyes opened, and she looked at him, and she looked, not composed, not performing anything, just looked. Her face was slightly red. His probably was too. The cold could have explained it. Neither of them said anything. From approximately knee height, Lily's voice arrived. Finally, she said, with the specific satisfaction of a 5-year-old whose theory has been confirmed. Dana laughed. Then Gerald laughed. Then Robert made a sound that was also a laugh, but was doing additional emotional work that he covered quickly by looking at the lake. Eleanor said, with absolute composure, "Perhaps we should take the photograph." Ethan looked up. Marcus was no longer beside Victoria. He'd moved, not dramatically, not in a way that made a scene, but he was now on the far end of the row, looking at the tree line, and something in the set of his shoulders said that he was done with this weekend in a way that had not been entirely voluntary. Victoria's hand found Ethan's. She didn't look at him, just found his hand and held it, and this time there was nothing calculated about it at all. "Ready?" Eleanor called out, camera raised. "Ready," Robert said, and smiled for the photograph. The picture taken, the family began to drift back toward the house in the way that follows any planned outdoor event. Suddenly, as a group, as though someone had flipped a switch. Lily had liberated Admiral from his holding position, and the two of them were running ahead, Lily's boots punching through the snow's crust with each step. Ethan and Victoria were last off the frozen shore. They walked without talking. The crunching of their footsteps and the distant sound of Lily explaining something to Admiral and the muffled family noise coming from the porch were the only sounds. The cold had found the gap between Ethan's collar and his neck and was making itself at home. About halfway across the lawn, Victoria said, "You didn't plan that." "No," he said. "I could tell." She was looking at the ground in front of them. "You're not a planner about things like that." "Things like what?" "Things you actually—" She stopped, tried again. "Things that matter." He didn't answer. "I kissed you back," she said. Not like it was news, more like she was filing a fact, making sure it was on the record between them. "I noticed. I want to—" She stopped again, exhaled. "I don't want to have this conversation where we say things and then we take them back, where we talk around it." "Okay. So I'm going to ask you something directly." "Okay," he said again. She stopped walking. He stopped too and turned to face her. The house was ahead of them, warm and lit, the porch filling up with family. Here on the snow, they were briefly out of anyone's direct eye line, though not invisible. Her face was still slightly red, her dark eyes direct, her hands in her coat pockets. "Was that just for Marcus?" she asked. He looked at her. "No." "How long?" It was a short question with a very long answer, and he thought about how to give her the honest version without burying her in it. He thought about the night on her kitchen floor in 2011, and the conference in Denver, and the Tuesday phone calls, and all the years of noticing and carefully not examining. "Long," he said, "longer than I was dealing with it." She absorbed this. "Why didn't you ever—" "Because you were my best friend," he said, "and I've lost things before. I didn't want to lose that." She was quiet for a moment. "You should have told me." "Probably." "No, I mean—" She pulled one hand out of her pocket and pushed it through her hair, which was a Victoria gesture he'd catalogued long ago as belonging to the moments when she was frustrated and trying not to be. "I would have wanted to know. Ethan, I would have—" She stopped. "Years," she said. "We've wasted—" "We didn't waste anything," he said. "How is 19 years of not saying the obvious thing not a waste?" "Because it's also 19 years of being the person you call at midnight, and the person who knows what you take in your coffee, and which version of your voice means you're actually fine, and which one means you're not." He held her gaze. "I don't think that's nothing." She looked at him for a long moment. The cold moved across the lawn between them, and somewhere Admiral barked, and the sounds of the birthday house carried faintly through the air. "It's not nothing," she said quietly. "It's everything, Ethan. That's the thing. It's already everything." He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. It was just true, and they both knew it, and it sat between them on the snow. From the porch, Lily's voice. "Dad, Eleanor says lunch is ready." Ethan and Victoria both looked up at the porch. Lily was at the railing, Admiral beside her, the rest of the family moving through the front door. Lily was watching them with the expression of someone who was not surprised by this situation. "Coming," Ethan called. He looked at Victoria. "We should go in," she said. "Yeah." She started walking. After 2 steps, she glanced back at him. "We're not done with this conversation." "I know." "Okay." She faced forward again. "Okay." They went in. Isham. Lunch was the last full meal of the weekend, and it had the texture of endings. A little louder than necessary, people filling the remaining hours with laughter and second helpings, and the specific overengagement of people who know they're about to separate and aren't ready to. Gerald told a long story about the Silverado that turned out to involve a county fair and a goat, and no satisfying conclusion, and everyone laughed anyway. Dana's husband did the thing with the sense of humor again and consolidated his position. Robert looked around his table at the assembled family with the expression of a man who understood exactly what he had. Marcus ate lunch and was courteous and unobtrusive, and shortly after dessert he mentioned he needed to start the drive back because of road conditions, and said his goodbyes and left. Ethan noticed that Victoria's posture, when the door closed behind Marcus, shifted in a way that probably only he could read. Not relief exactly. More like something she'd been subtly bracing for all weekend had simply stopped being in the room. She caught him looking. He looked away. Eleanor from across the table watched both of them with an expression she immediately arranged into something neutral and said to no one in particular, "More coffee?" The packing took longer than it should have, because Lily had distributed her belongings across 3 rooms and could only find 1 boot and had given Admiral her last drawing. Another one, done that morning, as a parting gift, and Admiral had carried it around in his mouth until Gerald retrieved it, slightly damp but intact. Ethan carried their bags to the car while Victoria said goodbye to her family in the way that always took longer than the simple word implied. He watched from the porch as Eleanor held her daughter's face in both hands and said something he couldn't hear, and Victoria nodded, and whatever it was seemed to settle something. Robert shook Ethan's hand on the porch. "Drive safe," he said. "The county road should be clear by now." "Should be." Robert looked at him. "I'm glad you came. Thank you for having us." "You know," Robert paused. He had the look of a man choosing his words for a specific reason. "The best things in my life didn't happen when I was ready for them. They happened when I finally stopped being so careful about being ready." He squeezed Ethan's hand once, then let go. "Something to think about on the drive." Lily said goodbye to Admiral for approximately 6 minutes. Admiral accepted this with immense dignity. Gerald pretended to be annoyed about the time this took, and was clearly not annoyed at all. They got in the car. The drive out of the driveway was quiet. The county road had been plowed and was clear, the snow banked on either side, the afternoon light going golden through the trees. Lily was in the back seat, leaning against the window, Admiral's face pressed against the back glass in her imagination probably, and she was quiet in the way she got when something had been good enough that she was still inside it. Ethan drove. Victoria sat in the passenger seat with her coat still on, looking at the road ahead. About 10 minutes out, Lily said from the back seat, "I like it there." "The lake house?" Ethan asked. "All of it? Robert and Eleanor and Gerald? And Dana's funny." A pause. "And Admiral?" "Yeah," Ethan said. Another pause, longer. Then, "Are we going back?" Neither adult answered immediately. Victoria turned her head and looked out the side window at the passing trees. "I hope so," Ethan said. Lily seemed satisfied with this. She shifted against the window and was quiet again. The road curved south, away from the lake, and the trees closed behind them, and the lake house disappeared from view. The late afternoon light fell across the dashboard in long, slanted lines, and the heater ticked steadily, and the road stretched out ahead of them, clear and open and going somewhere. Victoria reached over without looking at him and turned the radio on, low. Something quiet and unhurried, just enough to fill the silence without breaking it. Her hand stayed on the console between them for a moment after, not quite touching his, not quite not. He let his hand rest near hers. Neither of them moved. The road went on. They dropped Lily at his mother's place on the way back into the city. It hadn't been the plan. The plan had been to drive home, unpack, decompress, return to the ordinary Tuesday through Sunday architecture of their separate lives. But Lily had fallen asleep somewhere around mile 40, and Ethan's mother had texted to ask if she could keep her for dinner, and Ethan had looked at Victoria, and Victoria had looked at him, and neither of them said the obvious thing, which was that they needed to finish a conversation they'd started on a snow-covered lawn and had been carefully not finishing for 2 hours in a car. His mother came out to the driveway when he pulled up. She was a small woman in her early 60s who had survived a difficult few years with her son and come out the other side with very clear opinions about what he deserved. She took Lily's overnight bag, kissed Lily's head, and looked at Victoria in the passenger seat with the particular look of a woman who had been updated on certain developments by a 5-year-old who reported everything. "It's nice to finally meet you," his mother said, leaning down to the window. "You too," Victoria said. "Lily talks about you constantly. She talks about you too." His mother looked between them in a way that made Ethan consider driving away immediately. "Are you staying for dinner?" "We have to," Ethan started. "We can't tonight," Victoria said at the same time, and then glanced at him, and the glance said, "We need to talk, and we need to do it somewhere that isn't your mother's kitchen." His mother smiled in the manner of someone who understood everything. "Of course," she said. "Drive safe." She took Lily inside. Ethan pulled out of the driveway. They were quiet for 3 blocks. Then Victoria said, "Your mother already knows." "My mother has known things before I've known them my entire life. It's her primary skill." Lily told her. "Lily tells everyone everything. She has no concept of information management. She told me you cried at the end of a movie last month." "It was a good movie." "Which movie?" "That's not relevant." Victoria looked out the window. He could hear her trying not to smile. "She said it was an animated one." "This conversation is over." She did smile then. He could see it in the reflection of the dark window, the city lights starting to come on around them as they moved back into the density of streets and buildings and ordinary life. The lake house was already taking on the quality of something slightly unreal, the way places do when you leave them. "Where are we going?" she asked. He hadn't thought about it. He'd just been driving on autopilot, the route home from his mother's place running through his hands without any decision being made. He thought about it now. "My place," he said. A pause. "Okay." His apartment was what it was. He'd stopped being self-conscious about it somewhere in the last year. The slightly worn couch, the coffee table that had survived the divorce, and showed it, Lily's drawings on the refrigerator held up by magnets shaped like dinosaurs. It was not the kind of place a person designed. It was the kind of place a person lived in, which were different things. Victoria had been here before. She'd been here many times. She knew where he kept the coffee and which burner on the stove ran hot, and that the bathroom light took about 15 seconds to warm up. She was not seeing it for the first time. But something about tonight made the familiar space feel different, the way a room can feel different when the people in it are different, even if the room hasn't changed at all. He made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table with her coat finally off, her dark hair slightly loose from the day, and watched him move around the kitchen with the particular quality of attention she sometimes had, the kind where she was actually thinking about something else but looking at you while she did it. He set a mug in front of her and sat down across the table. For a moment, neither of them started. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. "You said you didn't want to do the thing where we talk around it." "I don't." "So?" She wrapped both hands around the mug. "So I've been trying to figure out what I want to say since the lawn. I've had 2 hours and I still don't have a good version of it." "Say the bad version." She looked at him. "The bad version is that I'm scared," she said. "That's it. That's the whole bad version." She looked down at the mug. "Not of you. Not of the thing between us. Whatever it is. I'm scared of what happens if we do this and it doesn't work. Because you're not—" She stopped. "You're not someone I can afford to lose, Ethan. If this goes wrong, I lose my best friend. And I've thought about that for years. I've used that thought as a reason not to—" She stopped again. "Not to what?" he said. "Not to let myself want it." She looked up. "I've been managing this for a long time, keeping it in a specific place where it couldn't do anything. And this weekend just—" She exhaled. "The snow and the family and the room and you with Lily and the way you—" She shook her head slightly. It stopped being manageable. He was quiet for a moment. "When did it start?" She made a short sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Do you actually not know?" "I want to hear you say it." She looked at him across the table. "The Denver conference," she said, 3 years ago. We shared that hotel room and you fell asleep reading and I woke up at 3 in the morning and you were—" She stopped. "Just there. And I had this thought, and I recognized it as the kind of thought you don't put back once you've had it." She picked up the mug, set it down again. "And then I spent the next 3 years being very careful." "Careful," he repeated. "You know what I mean." "I do," he said. "I've been doing the same thing." "For how long?" He thought about the honest answer. "Longer than Denver," he said. She looked at him. "There was a night in 2011, he said. "Your apartment. You called me at midnight because of—" "Ryan," she said quietly. The text message. "Yeah, I drove over and we sat on your kitchen floor until 3 in the morning and you kept saying you were fine and I kept not saying that I could see you weren't fine because I didn't know how to say what was actually going on, which was that I was sitting on your floor at 3 in the morning, wanting to be there more than I wanted to be anywhere else in my life." He paused. "And then I drove home and I told myself it was just the situation, that I was reading something into it. And I got better at reading other things into it, other explanations." He looked at her steadily. "I was very good at that for a long time." Victoria was looking at him with an expression he'd seen before but not often. Not the CEO, not the composed version, not even the late-night version by the fire. Something more open than any of those and more uncertain, which was rare enough for Victoria Hale that it changed the whole quality of the room. "What stopped you from telling me?" she said. "You were the most important thing in my life that was still intact," he said. "After the marriage, After everything, you were still there. I didn't want to be the thing that broke that. He paused, and I told myself I wasn't good enough for it. Don't, she said. It's true. Or it felt true. Different worlds. You said it yourself Friday night. You were trying to warn me about what Marcus was going to... I wasn't talking about you and me, she said. I was talking about what Marcus was going to imply. And I was right, and that was different. Was it? Ethan. Her voice had an edge to it. Do you think I care what you do for work? No? Do you think any of that, the money, the title, any of it, is something I value in a person? No, he said. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He tried to find it. I meant that you have built this thing, your career, your life, the version of yourself you've made. And it's real, and it's yours. And I didn't want to be the thing that complicated it. I fix cars, Vic. You run a company with 300 people in it. Our lives look different. I know what our lives look like, she said. I've been watching both of them for 19 years. She set the mug down with a sound that was slightly harder than necessary. You know what I notice about your life? What? I noticed that you raised a person, largely by yourself for a year and a half while working full-time, while your marriage was falling apart, and Lily is the least broken child I have ever met. She is funny and sharp, and she takes care of people who are smaller than her because she's watched you do that her whole life. She paused. You think I don't see that? You think that's less impressive to me than a title? He didn't answer. I run a company because I'm good at it, and I worked hard, and I got some things right and some things wrong, and I'm still figuring it out, she said. That's all that is. It's not a different category of person. Vic, I need you to hear me say this, she said, because I think you've been using it as a reason, and it's not a real reason. It's just the version of scared that sounds logical. He looked at her across the table. She was right. He'd known she was right from around the third sentence, and he was sitting with the specific discomfort of having a thing you'd told yourself quietly for years, named out loud and shown to be exactly what it was. Yeah, he said. Okay. Okay. You're right. He said it simply because it was simple. That's what it was. She looked at him for a moment, like she'd been prepared to argue further, and he'd taken the argument away. Okay, she said, and some of the edge went out of her voice. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator made its small mechanical sound. Lily's dinosaur magnets held up their drawings. The coffee had stopped steaming. So what do we do? Victoria asked. I don't know exactly. That's not helpful. I know. He looked at his hands, then at her. I know what I want. I've known what I want for a long time. I'm not uncertain about that part. Then what part are you uncertain about? Whether you're ready, he said. Not because of Marcus, that's done. I'm not worried about Marcus, but because you said you've been managing it, keeping it in a place. And sometimes when something's been in a place for long enough, it's, he searched for the word, safer to leave it there. She looked at him for a long time. You're asking if I'm sure, she said. I'm asking if you're sure. Ethan. She said his name the way she did sometimes, not starting a sentence with it, just saying it, like it was the whole sentence. I kissed you back in front of my entire family and my grandmother and the man who spent 2 years making me feel like I couldn't trust my own instincts. She held his gaze. That's how sure I am. Something in his chest, which had been carefully held for a very long time, let go. Okay, he said. Stop saying okay. What should I say? She pushed back her chair and stood up, and he stood up too without thinking about it, and she crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and kissed him again. Not the cold, surprised version on the snow, not the one with an audience, just the version that was only for them, in his kitchen with the dinosaur magnets and the worn table and the old life they were standing in the middle of, while something new opened up. He had both hands in her hair. She had fistfuls of his shirt. It was nothing like the movies. His elbow hit the cabinet. She pulled back slightly and laughed. A real laugh, short and startled. And he laughed too, and they stood there close with their foreheads almost touching, both of them breathing a little unevenly. We're terrible at this, she said. We're fine. Your elbow is fine. He looked at her. Her face was close, her dark eyes warm, and she looked like herself. The most like herself he'd ever seen. "Hi," she smiled. "Hi. I've wanted to do that in my own kitchen for 3 years." "Just 3 years?" "In my kitchen specifically. Elsewhere it's longer." She laughed again, and this time it was the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and genuine, the kind that has relief in it. And he pulled her in and held her against his chest, and she let him, her forehead dropping to his shoulder, both of them standing very still in the quiet kitchen. "This is terrifying," she said, into his shoulder. "Yeah." "What if we won't," he said. "You don't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I know us. I've known us for 19 years. We've survived worse than being honest." She was quiet against his shoulder. Then, "What do we tell Lily?" "Lily already knows. Lily announced it to my mother." She laughed again, muffled this time. "She said finally." "She did?" "How long has a 5-year-old known before we did?" "She's been asking me if I like you for the past 4 months. I've been very evasive." Victoria pulled back to look at him. "She asked you directly?" "Multiple times. She's relentless. She gets it from—" He looked at her. "Don't say me." "She gets it from the universe," he said. "That's not a thing." "It's a thing." She looked at him, still close, still with the expression that wasn't performing anything, and shook her head slightly. 19 years, she said. We're ridiculous. We were careful. We were cowards. Both things, he said. She smiled. It wasn't the composed CEO smile or the polite social one or even the late night one. It was just hers, all of it, unmanaged. She stayed, not in the way that required decisions or conversations, just in the ordinary way. They ordered dinner because neither of them felt like doing anything requiring effort and sat on the worn couch and talked. Not about what they'd said in the kitchen, about other things, about Robert's birthday toast. He'd given one at dinner that Ethan hadn't mentioned yet, a short one, not dramatic, just the quiet observation that the best days of his life had been the ones he'd stopped organizing and simply let happen. About Lily and the way she'd adopted Gerald's entire section of the family with no hesitation. About the weekend in general, the specific texture of it, the storm and the room and the frozen lake, and Marcus's face when he'd walked away. At some point, Victoria said, "What he said to me, during the photo." "I know. That's what you reacted to." "That's what I reacted to," he said. "You heard it." "Enough of it." She looked at the middle distance. "The thing is, a year ago, it would have worked. That exact line, that exact tone. I would have spent the rest of the day convinced I was performing." She paused. "And you didn't let it land." "It was always a lie," he said. "He just said it in a language you used to speak." She looked at him. That's a very precise way to put it. I've had time to think about Marcus. You've never met him before this weekend. I've heard about him for 3 years. I've done a lot of thinking." She was quiet for a moment. "Were you angry when you heard him?" "Yeah." "What kind of angry?" "The kind that doesn't need to make a scene," he said. "The kind that just acts." She nodded slowly. "Robert said something to me before we left," she said. "Before I said goodbye. He said—" She paused. "He said that the best thing about Ethan was that he never tried to be the most important person in a room. He just tried to be useful to the people he loved." Ethan said nothing. "He said it like it was obvious," she said. "Like he'd seen it clearly all weekend and was just filing a report. Your father is perceptive. He also said he hopes we come back for Christmas." Ethan looked at her. She was looking at the wall, the composure absolutely gone, replaced by something that was trying very hard to look casual and wasn't succeeding. "I told him that wasn't... We'd have to see how things... Victoria. I know it's fast, we just... Do you want to go back for Christmas?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said, simply, without dressing it up. "Yes, I want to go back for Christmas. I want Lily to see Admiral again, and I want to do the puzzle with Robert, and I want..." She stopped. "Yeah." "Then we'll go back for Christmas," he said. She blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." You're not going to... You said you wanted to go. I want to go. Lily will want to go because of the dog. He shrugged. I don't know what else there is to decide. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face did the thing it did when she was recalibrating, when the prepared version of a conversation had been replaced by something she hadn't prepared for. He'd seen it in boardrooms on the rare occasions he'd visited her at work. He'd seen it in her kitchen, years ago. He knew what it looked like. You make things very straightforward, she said. Has anyone ever told you that? Lily finds it annoying. Lily is 5. Lily has opinions. We've established that. She looked at her hands. I'm not used to it, things being straightforward. I know. I'm going to be bad at this sometimes, she said, at the not managing part. I'm going to overthink things and go quiet when I should say something and make it complicated when it doesn't need to be. I know, he said. You're not going to tell me not to worry about it? No, because you probably will do all of those things. So will I. We're going to be fine anyway. She looked at him. Then she exhaled. The long kind, the kind that carries something out with it. She leaned back against the couch cushions and closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, she looked tired in the good way, the way of a day that has been very full. I should go home, she said, without moving. Okay. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Okay. Neither of them moved. Ethan, she said. Yeah. I've been the person you call at midnight too. You know that, right? It goes both ways. He looked at her. When the divorce papers came through, she said, You called me, 11:30 on a Wednesday, and I answered and you said they signed and we didn't talk for like a minute and I just stayed on the phone. You know I stayed on the phone. I know. That wasn't... She looked for the word. That wasn't just friendship. On my side. She held his gaze. It hasn't only been friendship for a long time. I want you to know that. So you don't think this is... She stopped. So you don't think you were the only one carrying this? He reached over and took her hand. Just held it, the way he had on the frozen lakeshore with her family around them. Except now there was no performance required. No audience. Nothing it needed to be for anyone. I know, he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, in the apartment that was worn and familiar and full of small evidence of the life he'd been living, and would keep living, now with something added to it that had technically been there all along. Outside, the city did what cities do at night. Inside, the refrigerator hummed. One of Lily's drawings on the fridge was a house with 4 people in front of it, done 4 months ago, which Ethan had assumed at the time was just a house and just people. He looked at it now from the couch. 4 people. 4 distinct crayon figures. He'd never asked Lily who the 4th one was. He thought, sitting in the quiet with Victoria's head on his shoulder, that he probably already knew. The weeks after the lake house were not cinematic. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. That real life, unlike the version people told each other about, didn't have a clean transition moment where one chapter ended and a clearly better one began. What it had instead was a Tuesday morning where he was under a Dodge Ram with a leaking exhaust manifold and his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria that said, "Coffee this week?" And he stared at it for a second, thinking about all the times she'd sent that exact message and how this time was the same and completely different. He typed back Thursday. She sent a thumbs up. He went back to the exhaust manifold. That was how it started. Not with a declaration or a defined moment where they sat down and drew lines around what they were. Just the ordinary rhythm of 2 people who'd always been in each other's lives, continuing to be in each other's lives. Except now Ethan didn't spend energy carefully not examining the reasons, and Victoria didn't keep things managed in their designated place. The territory was the same. The way they moved through it had changed. Thursday coffee became a standing thing. It had sort of already been a standing thing. They'd gotten coffee most Thursdays for years, a habit that had grown out of proximity and never been formally assigned. Now it meant something it had always meant, but neither of them had been saying out loud. He picked her up from her office building on the first Thursday. She came out in her work clothes, coat over her arm, already mid-sentence on a call that she wrapped up as she opened the car door. She got in, ended the call, dropped her coat in the back seat, and said, Sorry, vendor call. They moved it to the same time on purpose, I'm almost certain. Why would they do that? To throw me off. It didn't work, but that was the idea. She pulled her seatbelt on. How was your morning? Leaking exhaust manifold on a full-size truck, and a woman brought in a Civic with a timing problem she'd been ignoring for approximately a year. Is the Civic okay? The Civic is very much not okay, but it will be. Victoria nodded, looking out the windshield. Lily said you let her come to the shop on Saturday. She likes it. She told me she changed a tire. She watched me change a tire, with a lot of input. She said she changed it. She tightened 2 lug nuts and considers that a full tire change, yes. Victoria smiled at the window. He could see the shape of it from the side. He'd been cataloging that smile for 19 years in the way of someone who didn't know they were doing it, and now he was doing it on purpose, which felt like finally putting a label on something that had always been sitting on his shelf. They got coffee. They sat at the corner table they'd sat at for years. They talked about her vendor problem and his Civic and a school thing Lily had coming up and a show Victoria was watching that she'd been trying to get him to start for 3 weeks. Normal. Easy. The kind of conversation that has 19 years of practice behind it, which means it has the specific quality of something that has been worn smooth and fits well. At some point, his hand was on the table and hers was next to it, and he moved his so their fingers overlapped. She didn't look up from what she was saying. She just adjusted her grip. When they left, she took his arm on the sidewalk, and they walked to the car like that, and it felt like something they'd been doing for years, which in a way they had been, minus the honesty. Lily adapted with the efficiency of a child who had already done the work of deciding. She'd known, or believed she knew, long before either of the adults involved had been ready to act on it. And so the transition for her was not from one thing to another, but simply from a theory to a confirmed fact. She received confirmation with the same calm authority with which she had announced that Admiral had a red collar based on Instagram research, as a person whose prior assessment has been validated. The first time Victoria came for dinner, on a weeknight, a Wednesday, unremarkable, she'd brought the ingredients for something she'd been making and wanted Lily to try. Lily had set the table with 3 places without being asked. She'd put Victoria's napkin on the left side instead of the right, which was wrong, but the intention was precise. Left side, Victoria said quietly to Ethan in the kitchen. She's learning. Should I tell her? Let her figure it out. Victoria looked at Lily through the kitchen doorway, currently reorganizing the placement of forks with absolute conviction. She's going to be furious when she finds out she's been doing it wrong. Probably for about 30 seconds, then she'll correct it and act like it was always right. She gets that from you. People keep saying that. Dinner that night was slightly burned on the bottom because Victoria had been in the middle of making a point and missed the timer, and Lily had eaten it with diplomatic silence and then said, "It's good. Just the bottom is a little," and Victoria had said, "I know," and Lily had said, "The middle part is really good," and Victoria had said, "Thank you, Lily." And the whole exchange had a quality to it that Ethan recognized, not from any particular memory, but from the general shape of the thing, the texture of how people who are becoming family talk to each other in the early days when they're still calibrating. After dinner, Lily had asked Victoria to help with her reading homework, which Victoria had done at the kitchen table with Lily while Ethan cleaned up, and at some point Lily had leaned against Victoria's arm without seeming to notice she was doing it. Victoria had gone still for a second. He'd seen it from the sink, the brief pause, like she was registering the weight of something and deciding how to carry it. Then she'd continued reading, her arm steady, Lily leaning. Ethan had turned back to the dishes. He'd stood there with the water running and felt something that he didn't have a clean word for. Not happiness exactly, though it was close. More like the feeling of watching a thing you've been quietly hoping for without knowing you were hoping for it arrive in an ordinary moment on an ordinary Wednesday, when the light was bad and the pasta was slightly burned and the napkins were on the wrong side. It wasn't perfect. It was better than that. It was real. The complications were also real. Victoria's schedule was not built for the rhythm Ethan had spent 18 months carefully constructing around Lily's needs. She had early calls and late dinners and trips that materialized on short notice, And Ethan had school pickup at 3 and a daughter who needed consistent bedtime and a job that didn't have flexibility built in because the cars didn't fix themselves while he was being flexible. They bumped into it about 6 weeks in. She'd planned to come for dinner on a Friday. Lily had known about it, had planned around it in the specific way she planned around things she cared about. And Victoria had texted at 4:30 to say a deal was closing and she couldn't get out before 9. Ethan had texted back okay and told Lily, and Lily had said oh and gone to her room, and Ethan had made dinner for 2, and the empty place at the table was a physical thing. When Victoria called at 9:30, Lily was asleep. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. He could hear the tired in it. "It's okay." "It's not. She was expecting me." She understood. "She shouldn't have to understand. She's 6. A pause. "She's still 5. Sorry, She turned 6 last month." I know her birthday, Ethan. I was there." "I know you were." He was quiet. "It's okay, Vic. This one time." "What if it's not one time? What if this is—" She stopped. "My life doesn't slow down. It hasn't slowed down in 8 years. I don't know how to—" She exhaled. "I don't want to be the person she can't count on." He sat down on the couch. "You're not." She had an empty place at the table. She had a dad and a good dinner, and she was asleep by 8:30. She's fine. "You're making this easier than it is." "I'm making it the size it actually is," he said. "You missed a Friday dinner. You're going to miss things sometimes. So am I. That's just what it is, Vic. You don't have to be perfect at this." A long pause. "I want to be." "I know you do." He leaned back against the cushions. "But you're trying to run the same standard on this that you run on your company, and that's not how it works. You can't optimize your way to being good at this. You just have to show up most of the time and repair it when you don't." Silence on the other end. "That's easier for you to say," she said. "You're good at showing up." "I wasn't always. I had a year where I wasn't good at it for anybody." He paused. "I learned. You learn." She was quiet for a moment. He heard her exhale, the particular kind that meant she was letting the argument go, not because she'd been convinced, but because she recognized she was fighting herself more than him. "Saturday?" she asked. "Saturday," he said. "Lily wants to try that farmer's market." "The one on Birch Street?" "She saw it on your Instagram." "She follows my Instagram?" "She uses my phone." "Yes." Another pause, and then something that was mostly laugh. "That child is everywhere." "She really is." "Okay." The tired in her voice had softened slightly. "Saturday. Birch Street Market. I'll be there." "I know you will." She was quiet a moment. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "I'm going to mess this up sometimes." "Yeah," he said. "And I'm going to say the wrong thing sometimes and not notice when you need something and get stuck in my own head. We already know this about each other." "That's not comforting." "It's true, which is better than comforting." She made a sound that gave up trying to be anything other than what it was, which was fond and tired and slightly beaten. "I'll see you Saturday." "Saturday," he said. She was there Saturday before they were. Lily found her at a produce stand examining apples with the focused attention she brought to all evaluations and ran to her from approximately 20 feet away. And Victoria caught her without even looking up from the apple. Just turned and opened her arms at exactly the right moment, the way you do with a person you already know the approach of. Ethan watched this from 20 feet back, his hands in his pockets. The farmer's market was the kind that had too many people and smelled like mulled cider, and someone had set up a small sound system playing something with an acoustic guitar. Lily was telling Victoria something about apples that she'd apparently learned from a book, and Victoria was listening with the expression she had when she was genuinely interested, which was different from the polite listening expression. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes focused, asking questions that meant she'd actually processed the previous sentence. Lily noticed the difference too. That was the thing about Lily. She noticed everything. He reached them, and Victoria handed him an apple without looking at him, the same way he'd handed her his coffee mug on Sunday morning at the lake house. The casual shorthand of people who have stopped performing consideration and started simply doing it. Honeycrisp, she said. Lily is correct that they're the superior apple. I've been saying that, Lily said with satisfaction. You have been saying that, Ethan confirmed. Nobody disagreed with you. Dad always buys Gala. Because they're on sale. That's not a reason. It absolutely is a reason. Victoria looked between them with the expression she got when this specific dynamic was happening, which was the closest she got to visibly delighted without acknowledging it. She'd told him once, in the early weeks of this new territory, that she'd spent years being quietly jealous of the way he and Lily were together. Not in a painful way, more in the way of watching something you want without knowing you want it. He hadn't known what to say to that, so he'd said, "Well, now you're in it," and she'd said, "I'm aware." And that had been enough. They spent 2 hours at the market. Lily chose vegetables based on color, which was not a nutritional strategy but produced an impressive range. Victoria found a honey vendor and had a conversation with the beekeeper that went on long enough that Ethan bought coffee from a neighboring stand and stood there drinking it while they talked about colony collapse disorder, with the enthusiasm of two people who had just discovered a shared obscure interest. Lily found a woman selling handmade puppets, and Ethan spent $12 on a fox puppet he hadn't planned to buy. But Lily's argument for it was compelling, and also she was 6, and it was a Saturday, and some things didn't require more reasoning than that. On the walk back to the car, Lily between them, the fox puppet in a paper bag, Victoria said, "Robert called." Ethan looked at her. "About? Christmas?" She had her hands in her coat pockets, looking ahead. "He wanted to make sure we were still coming." "We told him we were coming." "I know. He's excited." She paused. "He said Eleanor has been planning the room situation since September." The room situation. "I believe the honeymoon suite has been claimed by Gerald and his knee on a permanent basis." She said it with perfect composure. "Apparently the East Wing guest room has a very comfortable pull-out sofa." He looked at her. She kept her eyes forward, but the corner of her mouth was doing something. "That's very considerate of Gerald," he said. Remarkably considerate. Lily, who had been walking between them and listening to all of this. "What's a pull-out sofa?" "A sofa that becomes a bed," Victoria said. "Why would you want that?" "You wouldn't," Ethan said. "Apparently Gerald has taken one for the team." Lily processed this. "Is Gerald our family now?" she asked. "Because of Admiral?" Ethan and Victoria both looked at her. Lily looked up at them with the expression of someone who has asked a reasonable question and is waiting for a reasonable answer. "He's coming to Christmas too, at the lake house. And he's bringing Admiral." She looked at Ethan. "Is that our family?" Ethan thought about how to answer that. About Robert on the porch with his birthday coffee. About Eleanor's face when she'd watched Lily lean against Victoria's arm. About Dana saying she looks like herself. About the drawing on his refrigerator with 4 figures in front of a house. "Yeah," he said. "I think that's our family." Lily nodded as though this confirmed something she'd been working on. Then she took both their hands, one on each side, and kept walking, and neither of them said anything, and the farmer's market noise faded behind them, and the fox puppet rustled in its paper bag. Christmas at the lake house was chaos, which was the correct word for it. 14 people in a 3-story house, 2 days before Christmas, with a golden retriever who treated the holiday decorations as a personal obstacle course. Eleanor had outdone September's birthday breakfast by a margin that suggested she'd been planning it since roughly September's birthday breakfast. Robert had put up lights along the porch railing that Ethan had been drafted to help with the first afternoon, and Gerald had supervised from the driveway with specific opinions about the spacing. The East Wing guest room was comfortable. The pull-out sofa was never used. Nobody mentioned this, which was the family way of acknowledging something without making it a production. Lily had arrived at the lake house and immediately located Admiral, confirmed the red collar was still present, and handed over a new drawing. This one more elaborate than the previous ones, showing Admiral in what appeared to be a superhero cape, labeled in Lily's evolving handwriting, Admiral, good dog, superhero. Gerald had taken this with great seriousness and placed it on the refrigerator next to Eleanor's grocery list. Dana's husband turned out to be even funnier at Christmas than he'd been at the birthday weekend. and this reorganized everyone's impression of him further in the upward direction. Marion's daughter and Lily formed a friendship of immediate and total intensity, the way children sometimes do, and were found on Christmas morning having apparently been awake since 4:30, discussing matters of great importance in low voices on the floor of Lily's room. Marcus was not there. He hadn't been invited. There had been no conversation about it, no decision announced. He simply wasn't part of the gathering, the way certain things stop being part of your life, not through a formal ending, but through the slow, natural process of no longer being included. Victoria noticed his absence differently than she expected to. Not with relief, exactly. The anxiety about Marcus had resolved itself somewhere in the months since the lake house. Not in a dramatic moment, but in the ordinary way that fears resolve when you've stopped organizing your life around them. She noticed his absence the way you notice that a headache is gone. Mostly, she just noticed what was present instead. What was present? Robert telling Lily the history of the lake house at the kitchen table. The two of them bent over old photographs, Lily asking questions with the focused attention of someone archiving information for future use. What was present? Eleanor teaching Victoria how she made the rolls, which was a tradition Eleanor had with people she'd decided to keep, and which Victoria understood and was moved by in a way she covered by being very focused on the technique. What was present? Ethan on the porch roof with Gerald, fixing a section of the Christmas lights that had gone out on Christmas Eve. Gerald handing up tools with the wordless efficiency of two men who understand that some things are better fixed than discussed. She stood in the doorway watching them and thought about what Ethan had said in his kitchen that first night. I know what I want. I've known what I want for a long time. She'd had the same thing sitting in the same corner of herself for years. She'd called it by other names. She'd managed it and categorized it and built careful walls around it and told herself the walls were wisdom. She'd had Marcus, who had been good at making her feel like the instinct to want something real was itself the problem. She'd been so careful for so long. Careful with herself. Careful with Ethan. Careful with the friendship, as though it were made of something fragile, as though the most durable thing in her life needed protection from the truth of what it was. What she knew now, standing in the doorway of her father's lake house on Christmas Eve, watching the man she loved argue gently with her uncle about string light spacing, was that careful had cost her years. Careful had been, in its own way, a kind of fear dressed up in responsible language. She wasn't sorry for all of it. Some of it had been right. Some of the care had kept good things intact. But she was done pretending that caution and wisdom were the same thing. Ethan looked down from the roof and saw her in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just looked. The cold air between them, his breath visible, Gerald still talking about the lights in the background. She lifted her coffee mug slightly. He lifted his chin in acknowledgement. The wordless vocabulary of two people who've been speaking it long enough that they no longer need to translate. Gerald finally noticed, Are you going to help or just watch? Watching, she said. Useful, Gerald said, and handed Ethan another length of lights. Christmas morning was Lily's. She was up at 5:15. Ethan knew this because he heard her. The careful creak of footsteps in the hallway that Lily believed were quiet and that were in fact audible from 3 rooms away. He lay still and listened to her creep past their door and down the stairs, then heard the creak stop, then heard small footsteps come back up, then heard a soft knock. Dad? A whisper at the door. I think it's time. It's 5:15 in the morning. That's basically 6. It is not basically 6. It's the same hour. Victoria beside him made a sound into the pillow that was trying to be sleeping but was clearly not sleeping. Your mom is asleep, Ethan said. A pause. Victoria's not my mom, Lily said, not correcting him exactly. More like filing a clarification, the way she filed things. I know, he said. I misspoke. Another pause, this one slightly different. Is she going to be? Lily asked. The question, delivered in a 6-year-old's whisper through a bedroom door at 5:15 on Christmas morning, was not the version of that conversation Ethan had been thinking about having. He looked at the ceiling. Beside him, Victoria was completely still, which was the stillness of someone who is very much awake, and paying close attention. "That's a big question for before sunrise," he said. "I've been thinking about it." "I know you have." "I just want to know," Lily said, "so I know what to call her at school." He considered this. "What do you call her now?" "Victoria. But Emma at school calls hers Mom, and I thought—" A small pause. "I thought maybe when she's been here longer I could ask her." A pause. "Can I ask her?" He turned his head and looked at Victoria in the dark. She was lying completely still with her face turned toward him, and he could see even in the low light that she was not sleeping and had not been sleeping and that her eyes were open. He looked at her for a moment. She reached over and touched his hand once, briefly, and then said toward the door in a voice that was only slightly unsteady, "Lily." A beat. "You're awake." "I'm awake." "Oh." A small silence. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard what you said." Lily was quiet for a moment on the other side of the door, then, "Is that okay?" "Yes," Victoria said. "It's okay to ask, when you're ready to ask." "Okay." Another pause. "Can we go downstairs now?" "Give me 5 minutes," Ethan said. 4 minutes, Lily said, and her footsteps retreated back down the hall. In the dark, Ethan looked at Victoria. She was still looking at the ceiling now, her hand still near his on the blanket. "Are you okay?" he said. "Give me a second." He gave her a second. "I didn't expect—" She stopped. "I knew she might, eventually. I just wasn't—" She exhaled. "I'm okay. I'm good." She turned her head to look at him. She asked permission. She asked if it was okay to ask me. She's considerate. She's 6. Most 6-year-olds don't ask permission before having a feeling. She's been watching adults manage their feelings for a while. She's picked up some habits. Victoria was quiet a moment. "She learned that from you?" "I'm not always great at it." "You're better than you think." She turned to look at him, and in the low light her expression was the most unguarded version of itself. No composure to maintain at 5:15 in the morning in a lake house bedroom on Christmas. Just her, just the actual thing. "I want her to, if she wants to. I want that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She said it simply. "Yeah, I do." He reached over and tucked a piece of hair back from her face, the kind of small gesture that meant nothing and everything. "Merry Christmas," he said. "Merry Christmas." She looked at him. "We should go downstairs before she comes back. We have—" He checked his phone. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "Then we should move." They moved. The rest of Christmas Day has the quality that the best days have, which is that it doesn't remember itself in order. What Ethan remembered later was not a sequence but a collection. Lily's face when she found the fox puppet's friend under the tree, a matching rabbit that Victoria had bought without telling him, the two of them now apparently a set. Robert reading the card Lily had made him, this one more elaborate than the birthday one, with a drawing of the whole lake house including the porch lights. Eleanor at the stove with Victoria beside her, both of them covered in flour, Eleanor saying something that made Victoria laugh, the real laugh. Gerald teaching Lily a card game with rules that may have been partially invented, both of them deeply serious about it. Admiral wearing a Christmas bandana that Gerald denied putting on him. And in the evening, after dinner, after Lily had fallen asleep on the living room couch with Admiral and had been carried up to bed without waking, a small miracle of exhaustion, the adults had settled into the aftermath of Christmas in the way that families do. Quieter. A little loose. The fire low, the tree lights still on, the general feeling of a day well used. Robert had poured drinks for anyone who wanted one and settled into his chair by the fire. The cousins were in the other room. Eleanor had taken her tea and a book, which was her signal that she was present but not available for more coordination. In the comfortable quiet, Robert looked at Ethan across the room and said, "You know, I spent a long time waiting to feel ready for things." Ethan looked at him. "My whole 40s, Robert said. I kept thinking, when the mortgage is paid off, when the business is stable, when the kids are settled, there was always a next thing that needed to happen before I could afford to just—" He made a small gesture. "Be where I was." "What changed?" Ethan asked. Eleanor, Robert said. She looked at me one night. This was maybe 15 years ago, and she said, Robert, you keep preparing to live, and I'm over here just living it. And she wasn't angry about it, just stating a fact. He looked at the fire. I heard it that time. He didn't say anything else about it. He didn't need to. It landed the way things land when they're meant to. Not dramatically, just with the particular weight of a truth that has been waiting for the right moment to be said aloud. Victoria was sitting beside Ethan on the couch, their shoulders touching, and he felt her shift slightly, taking it in. He thought about all the years of being careful, his careful, her careful, all the elaborate management of something that had simply been there, waiting with more patience than either of them deserved. He thought about what you lose when you're too careful with good things. Not the thing itself usually, but time. The version of your life you could have been living while you were busy protecting yourself from it. He'd learned something in the last year that he hadn't expected to learn, which was that the fear of losing good things had cost him years of having them fully. The friendship had been real. What it had grown into was real. Both things could be true, and the second one didn't undo the first. It extended it, added to it, gave it somewhere to go. That was the thing about careful people. They thought they were protecting something. Mostly, they were just postponing the part where they actually got to have it. They drove home 2 days after Christmas. The county road was clear and dry. The storm from November, a memory in the shape of the plowed snow berms, still standing along the shoulders, brown-edged and old. The lake house receded in the rear-view mirror, and Ethan let it go without trying to hold it. It would be there, the way it had always been there, the way good places stay available to you when you need them. Lily was awake this time. She'd been awake since the moment they'd put their bags in the car, sitting in the back seat with the fox puppet in one hand and the rabbit puppet in the other, conducting a quiet private drama that she was narrating under her breath. At some point she said, without looking up, "They're called Felix and June." "The puppets," Ethan said. "Felix is the fox, June is the rabbit. They're best friends who got separated and now they're finding each other." Victoria turned slightly in her seat to look at her. "Where were they separated?" "A big storm," Lily said. "The snow came and Felix went one way and June went the other way, but then it stopped snowing and they found each other." Neither adult said anything for a moment. "How does it end?" Victoria asked. Lily looked up at her with Ethan's brown eyes, direct and certain. "They stay together," she said. "That's the ending. They just stay together." She went back to the puppets. Victoria looked at Ethan. He looked at her. There was nothing to say about that, and they both knew it, and so neither of them said anything. She reached over and touched the back of his hand where it rested on the gear shift, her fingers there and then not there, light as a question you already know the answer to. He turned his hand over. She took it. They drove south through the winter morning, the three of them, the heater running and the radio low and Lily's quiet story voices in the back seat. The lake was behind them and the city was ahead, and between the two was just the road, open and clear, and the ordinary, remarkable fact of being exactly where you are with the people you love. That was it, really. That was the whole of it. Not the perfect story. Not the version where everything lined up and the timing was right and nobody was afraid. The real version. The one with bad timing and burned pasta and empty chairs on Friday nights, an elbow in the cabinet kisses and 5:15 Christmas mornings, and a fox puppet named Felix looking for a rabbit named June in the snow. The version where two people spent 19 years being each other's most important thing and finally, imperfectly, with all the lost time acknowledged and set down, decided to stop being careful about it. You don't get the time back. That's the truth nobody tells you. The years of careful, the years of managing, the years of staying in the safe lane, they don't come back, and they don't get swapped out for better years when you finally stop. What you get is now. What you get is the road ahead and the hand in yours and the small voice in the backseat inventing endings where the ones who were separated by the storm find each other and stay. That's enough. It turns out that's more than enough. It turns out that was everything.